Alright, in our TED Talk, The High Cost of Our Cheap Fashion by Maxine Bidet, I don't know how to say her name. She talked about how the clothing we wear greatly affects our environment. She started off talking about the problems in our world and environment and how we're not really given an option on how to solve these problems. She says that most of the time we feel powerless and that we can't do anything, and we expect government to fix the problems. But sometimes the government is gridlocked. She says that we actually do have a power in fixing some of these problems. That power is what we wear, our clothing. Then she begins on saying the apparel industry has become the second most polluting industry in the world. She also talks about how we have reached peak stuff. And she means this by we purchased 3 times the amount of clothing than we did in 1960. And because of that, the importation of clothing has greatly increased. The overseas production became a trend because it was much, much cheaper and much less regulated. So more profit, and they can get away with more things. She says that the marketing by these fast fashion companies caused us to buy their cheap clothing by advertising that they were very competent and they were greatly made clothing. She said in 1960, 95% of our clothing was American made, but now less than 2% is American made, and that represents an 80% manufacturing drop as well. So 80% of our jobs from 1960 no longer exist in America and are probably now being made in overseas countries for a greater profit. She says fast fashion is fueled by polyester, which I'm sure most of you guys know what polyester is, and especially after this video. It's a polluting plastic that's made from fossil fuels. It's now in over 50% of our clothing. It's a non-biodegradable, and it has microplastics in oceans and food chains, non-breathable, and very energy intensive. Non-biodegradable means that every piece of clothing made with polyester is still around. And the microplastics in the oceans and food chain are when you wash your clothes, all that water's got to go somewhere, and it ends back up in rivers, groundwater, oceans. Therefore, there's microplastic in our oceans. In the food chain, she begins by giving a statistic that 1 in 4 fish sold at supermarkets contain microplastics, which is surprisingly alarming. The graph she shows that 41.8% of clothing comes from China, and the power grid map that she showed is 3/4 of the energy supply in China is coal, which is very, very energy intensive. The apparel industry is 10% of the carbon footprint. And to put it in perspective, she says it's 5 times more than all the airline travel worldwide. She said that in order to change this, she wants to look for clothing that's more ethical. But the problem is, being ethical isn't regulated. But meaning that factories and companies can show pictures of where they make their clothing, but pictures do not equal transparency. They don't equal wages. They don't equal the shadow factories, so like the secondhand factories that are outsourced. And they don't show the material sustainability. The transparency would be like if they told us the factory names, that way we can do our own research and they tell us everything about it. From my point of view of it, I just looked. All my work shirts are 50-50 polyester and cotton, and I have to wear these every day. And it's a very big company that I work for, so they're everywhere. That's just work. I haven't looked at any of my personal clothing or casual clothing, but I guarantee you it's almost all polyester, just because it's cheap and it works. This means that I could be adding to the pollution, but so is everyone. Hopefully we can stop it. And she talked about her site and how the ethics change and how you can sort out and find your clothing. Thank you.